This is a tier list for the ML5 boss selector we'll be getting. The units available in the selector are Archdemon Shadow, Straze, Belian, Zeo, and Harsetti. The first boss of the game, Archdemon Shadow, I think she is the worst out of the 5 boss units, so I'm going to be putting her in B tier. Her EE, which allows her highest attack ally to dual attack with her, is pretty good, but she just relies too much on the opponent not having immunity to land her seal on her skill 1, and it is very hard for her to solo carry games on her own. For PvP, I'd give her a 2 out of 5, and PvE 1 out of 5. Next up we have Straze, who is actually a very strong DPS after his new EE. He definitely deserves A tier. He can be built fast for more aggro builds, or slower with a full damage build, which can one-shot even through anti-penetration units like ML5 if he's built well enough. If he gets to take a turn and the other player has no pen resistance whatsoever, something is definitely gonna die, giving him an extra turn into another AoE hit. He is also even widely used in PvE because of his one-shot potential on PvE bosses. PvP 4 out of 5, PvE also 4 out of 5. Our third boss is Belian, who has fallen off quite a bit, especially if you don't have the 3F artifact, which gives her 2 different builds, one with 3F and one without 3F. If you do have 3F, I think she goes into the bottom of A tier. If you don't, I think she's a lot worse and only goes into the B tier, but still above Archdemon Shadow, so top of B tier. Without 3F, she can essentially only be picked to deny cleavers who heavily rely on souls, such as a Ludwig cleave. But even then, units like Frida can bypass a soul denial passive. If she does have 3F, she is a lot better. She can be built counter immunity with some decent speed and a lot of HP. And the fixed damage, AoE fixed damage, especially when the skill 1 procs to the double 3F AoE proc, will always do a lot of damage, but unfortunately FCC exists, so that halves the damage the 3F will do, making Belian a bit weaker because FCC is a very meta unit right now. PvP 3 out of 5, PvE 1 out of 5 for the 3F build. Next we have Zeo, who is definitely the best out of the 5 boss units, so he easily goes into S tier. Although he has 0 PvE usage, his PvP usage is just too good as he is essentially guaranteed to take the first turn. Paired with units that have synergy, that we call Zeo bridges, he allows even a slower player to cleave faster players. However, depending on how the new Lady of the Scales passive interacts with his own CR push passive, he may be a lot harder to build to guarantee turn 1, which could reduce his value a little bit, but we'll have to see how the interaction actually works in the game. But I will go into more detail about it later. For now, PvP 6 out of 5, PvE 1 out of 5. Finally, we get to our 5th and latest boss unit, Harsetti. She has fallen off a bit since she came out due to the release of several soft counters to lower her overall power like Young Senya and Aram, so I think she belongs in the top of A tier. She is still very valuable because she is the second unit after Zeo that is guaranteed to go first, allowing slower players to contest turn 1. However, unlike Zeo, there are very few units that have good synergy with Harsetti, which turns many games into an RNG fiesta. Due to this, I don't think she is as good as Zeo, so also Zeo just goes before her when both of them in the game. PvP 5 out of 5, PvE 2 out of 5. Now I will go into more detail about the Lady of the Scales and Zeo passive interaction. We still don't know if this is actually intended and will be going into the game like this, but if it does, then it will lower Zeo's value a little bit because then he can actually be cut by speed demons putting their fast gear onto Lady. We can see here that Zeo's passive increases his CR by 20%. Lady's passive here increases her CR by 50% of the amount of combat readiness increased by the opponent. So that means she will gain 10% when Zeo gains 20%. Since Lady has 117 base speed while Zeo only has 106, there is some potential for Lady to cut Zeo and take turn 1 if this interaction goes through. I have calculated some scenarios here with exact numbers. So our first scenario is a 260 speed Zeo. which is a realistic number for most of the player base to hit, even low ranking players, because that is only a 16.6 speed average per piece, which is very doable. So a 260 Zio is equivalent to a 325 speed unit with his 20% CR push. However, the Lady of the Scales only needs 293 speed, which is equivalent to 325.6 speed with her 10% CR push to outspeed Zio, not counting speed RNG. And this is also kind of doable for most of the player base with a 20.4 speed average per piece. So that means a 260 Zio can be easily cut by most players with only a 20 speed average on their Lady. However, 260 is not considered safe in today's meta, so we'll look at a more realistic scenario here with a 270 speed Zio, which is considered pretty safe even in the higher ranks. So 270 Zio is an 18.6 speed average per piece, and equivalent to 337.5 actual speed. And to cut with Lady, we need a 304 Lady, which is equivalent to 337.8 actual speed. For the 304 Lady, we need 22.6 average speed, which is getting into pretty fast territory here. But the thing is, most of the top players will easily be able to make something like this possible. So that means for Zio to be safe, he'll have to be something like 280 or 285. And finally, let's look at a 280 speed Zio, which is equivalent to 350 speed. To cut with Lady, you'll need a 315 Lady, and for a 315 Lady, you need a 24.6 average speed per piece, which is very hard for even many top players to do. So this is a realistic, safe Zio speed for Lady. However, this is still very possible to achieve, even maybe higher for some players, because they have like 26 speeders and like 28 or 29 speeders even. But realistically, no one's going to be putting the 5 fastest speed pieces onto the Lady just to outspeed a 280 Zio. So I'd say 280 will be extremely safe for 99% of cases. However, it does require 20.6 average speed per piece, which is kind of doable still, but most players who can do this will have to have a crappy Zio with just speed and no other stats like effectiveness or crit. So it is a trade-off that I think it's better sticking with a slower Zio with actual effectiveness and crit stats. So I hope you can see after all that explanation, if this interaction does go through, why the value of Zio is kind of going to drop a little bit, because his stat requirements are going to go through the roof. And if you don't have those stat requirements, he has a chance of being cut by a fast Lady. I hope you can see how that devalues him a little bit, even though he's still the best option by far to take from the boss selector.